Hello everyone and welcome back to Archaeo SMP Season 2. As you can tell, I've got a lot of cows. I have so many cows. I also changed them to be Highland cows because Highland cows are very common in Scotland. They're kind of iconic with Scottish farming and agriculture and cows in general. So basically I took the woolly cow texture from Minecraft Earth and I recreated it in Java Edition. So this is just a texture pack. It doesn't have like the woolly bits on the side. I think the model is different from what it was in Minecraft Earth would be my guess in terms of like how it was textured. So if anybody knows like whether I could get the woolly bits on the side for the current 1.21 cow model, I don't think I can because the texture was a little bit like anytime I tried it got really wonky, so I think the model itself just doesn't have that capability. But if it does, let me know in the comments because I'd be curious. I've got so many cows. Look, I started getting cows and then I was like, how many cows can I fit in my buyer house, in the buyer part of my buyer house? The answer is a lot. We've done how many here? Animals bred 49. I don't know that that's how many cows I've got in here, but it's at least that number, right? If I've bred them that many times. Well, I suppose I bred 2 sheep, so maybe it's 48. But still, I've expanded. Oh yeah, so I built a well, a wee little well with the tough blocks. I really like the tough bricks as a well. And I'm debating getting like an armor stand in here with like a little, I don't know, a chain and then like a little bucket or something. But I'm not sure if it would like make it difficult to actually get water out of the well. So I've not done it yet. And then I expanded my crop field because my goodness, I need more hay bales, even more hay bales. So I've been harvesting hay bales and I've been fishing. And this is only some of what I've been doing. This is like, there's so much more. I was ill for a bit, so I went, ooh, we have a gift. We have hay bales. We have, oh my gosh, 2 stacks of hay bales is huge. I don't know if you've ever had to get hay bales for a build. Hope this helps. Built a large field recently. I'm pretty sure this is from Clara. Thank you, Clara. We're gonna need to get Clara something nice. Also, so I was ill and I went mining and I found a skeleton spawner and I was all excited. So I was like, let me record this. And then I didn't realize that OBS was on the wrong scene. So not only did it not record the game or the game noise, it didn't even record my voice because the scene that it was on doesn't even have my mic in it. So that's how ill I was. For a few days, but I found a skeleton spawner, and in the chests my saddle luck continued, so good to know that that's continuing from season 1. But I also found Other Side, first music disc of the season, and it's Other Side, so I'm very happy with that. We're gonna need to make a jukebox. I also have, as you've probably seen, I've got diamond armor now. I've only enchanted the chestplate and the boots because I had those first. Okay, so the plan for today, we talked about buyer houses last episode as somewhere that like you could keep your animals. Another very traditional structure in Scotland that has been popular for centuries, like probably at least a millennia, if not more, is something called a shieling or a shieling hut. So what is a shieling? A shieling is a small building made out of turf or dry stone that was used as a temporary house for cattle herders in summertime in Scotland. Most shielings stopped being used in the 17th century, but some of them were still used as recently as the 1950s. You can find shielings all over Scotland's upland areas. Basically, if it's on a hill and it's a single building that you can see that's usually made out of stone, there's a decent chance that that's a shieling. Shielings are really important places in Scottish agriculture because it's where most of the agricultural communities spent their summers for centuries. Cows need plants to eat. That's how cows work, right? In the wintertime, the cows were kept close to town because they needed to be kept relatively safe from the cold and the snow. But in summertime, the snow on the hills melts and plants grow everywhere. And by the summertime, the cows have eaten most of the food that's around the town, so they need to get moved anyway to new pastures, and there's plenty of food up the hill. So cattle farmers would bring their cattle up the hill for the summer months and stay in Shielings so that they didn't have to herd their cattle up and down a mountain every single day, because let's be honest, nobody really wants to do that if they don't have to. So as I've said, today we're building a shieling. In fact, actually we're building 2 shielings. This one that I'm starting with is for cattle and cows. I have far too many cows in my buyer house. You know, I was too excited about the question of whether I could that I didn't stop to think about whether I should. So we need to take some of these cattle and bring them up the hill because there are too many in my buyer house right now. The second shieling I'm going to build is going even further up the hill, and that one I'm going to use for sheep. But we'll talk about that one more once I'm building it. Shielings have turf or dry stone walls, and they're usually rectangular, although some of them might have rounded corners and some might be more ovals like my buyer house down there. But shielings are also usually a lot smaller than buyer houses too. So remember how I said that buyer houses are like 5 to 8 meters wide and about 20 meters long? Shielings are usually between like 3 to 8 meters wide and only like 5 to 14 meters long. I'm going to make mine the same width as the buyer house, so we're going to have 5 meters wide on the inside, but then I'm only making it 10 meters long on the inside, so half as long as the buyer house. But remember that we're not trying to fit animals in this building, and since we aren't rounding the corners, we actually have more living space in this shieling than we do in the buyer house. Not huge amounts more space, but still. Shielings also often had gabled roofs, which is a type of roof with 2 sloped sides that meet at the top. A bit like if you stacked 2 playing cards up against each other, or like you opened like a birthday card, you opened it up and then like stood it on the edges. The typical thing you probably think of when you think of roofs. These roofs were usually covered in turf or rushes or thatch made from heather, which is similar to the thatch roof on my buyer house. I've opted for turf walls and a thatch roof here again, so this is going to look very similar to my buyer house, but it's also not going to be quite the same as the buyer house. The doorways of shielings are often in the middle of them, or at least close enough to the middle of them, and then there are often 2 or 3 different rooms inside of the shieling, rather than the one room that we've put in the buyer house. I mean, like, we've got the animal area, but in the human area, we've really got the one room, and then we've got the upper storage. And you want to know something cool? Because I'm doing Scottish archaeology this season, and I am a Scottish archaeologist, I know a heck of a lot of other Scottish archaeologists. One of them is Eddie Stewart, who just so happens to be a specialist in shielings, and he's actually excavated several shielings in Glencoe and Rannochmoor. I've linked to his Twitter page and the blog for the research team in the description down below, so if you're interested in shielings, definitely check out Eddie's work. Eddie knows a lot about shielings, as I said, so I asked him what he'd like people to know about them, and this is what he said. The biggest thing for Eddie is that these shielings were busy places. These cattle farmers weren't out on their own by themselves with one person per shieling and no one to talk to all day, every day for the entirety of the summer. Lots of people from the town went up to the hills in the summertime, and many people would probably go back and forth between the shieling and the town. Not necessarily on a daily basis, but also not on like a monthly basis either. There was a lot of travel and a lot of people and a lot of activity in these places. There's also a lot of stuff being made at shielings. Obviously we have cows, and most of those cows in Scotland were dairy cows, so butter and cheeses and cream and such would be made from the milk, either for the family to use or for them to sell, either as it was made or later on in the season, in the case of probably a lot of the cheeses. But there's also a whole bunch of other things that happens in these uplands while the cows are just munching away on the grass. Some shieling areas had raised charcoal burning platforms to make charcoal from the nearby woodlands. Some of them were set up for whiskey stilling, and don't forget peat! Scotland's uplands are covered in peat, which is partly decayed plants or organic material. It's been a great source of fuel for Scottish fires for millennia, and peat harvesting was rather common around shielings in the summer months. There's also archaeological evidence of people processing flax, or turning flax into linen for clothing up at these shielings. And remember, spindles like a drop spindle, they're not very hard to transport. In fact, that's part of the appeal, is how portable a drop spindle is. So a lot of flax was probably at the very least spun into linen thread up at these shielings, and they may have even turned it into cloth or clothing up here too. So since these places made a lot of stuff, and I've been wanting a space for things like a loom and an anvil and such, like a workshop sort of area, I'm going to turn most of this shieling into a bit of a workshop for myself. I made the inside of this shieling similar to like the walls at the outside of the building. I made it very similar to the Byre house, not because that's exactly how shielings always were, but because I feel like that's probably how a lot of earlier shielings might have been. Sort of turf walls with packed earth floors, a hearth in the middle, some workstations. And the other thing we know about these shielings is that they didn't just have a single room like the Byre house does down there. They have multiple rooms. So in this one, I've just put 2 rooms. I've made a small bedroom, a very small bedroom, but it's a small bedroom. And then I've made a workshop area. So this has basically every workstation. Well, it doesn't have like a smoker and a blast furnace because I have those down at the Byre house and I don't have that much iron. I have to go mining for some more iron. But there's a cartography table, a loom, a fletching table, which obviously we can't do anything with. Oh, that's actually kind of nice. I'll leave that there. That was an accident, but I like it. And actually, speaking of, we can do one here as well. There's a cauldron. So this is basically like my main workshop area. Just like Eddie was saying, that these places, people are making a lot of things in these spaces. There's a lot of activity happening. Now, the walls are a bit bare at the moment. I'm gonna, once I've got wool, I'm gonna be making banners and putting them up. But these, what I decided to do, this is the best I could do representation-wise for like wrapped cheese in cloth, just as it's kind of drying / curing. I thought that worked rather well, the wool mini blocks. And then this one's just on an armor stand because for some reason you cannot put a player head on the bottom of a block. And then I've just put some storage in here. I'm not using any of the storage up here, but I thought I'd put a loft up or a storage area up like I did in the Byre house, but I've also installed a fence so that you can't just accidentally walk off the edge. So this is very similar to the Byre house, but it's not the same as the Byre house, as you can see from the inside. Right, so I had some extra ideas of what to do in here. It's not huge amounts, but rather than put paintings on this wall, I decided it would be kind of cool to do like drying plants and herbs and such with armor stands. I'm keeping it vague because obviously this is a sheaf of wheat in Minecraft, but it could be anything. And the fence gates, when they're opened into the wall, they just look like things that are mounted on the wall to hang stuff on, which is great. And then we've got the workstation, which I already showed you, but then there's also a decorated pot, which I figured could be something like a milk jug or something, and then a wee shovel just leaning up by the door for whenever you need to shovel something. So yeah, it's cozy. Here, let's turn shaders on. Look at how nice this looks. I'm such a fan of these designs. I really like these little shielings. So that's this shieling done, but I said I was building 2 shielings today. Why 2 shielings? Because there's actually a difference between shielings used for cattle and shielings used for sheep or goats. So shielings for cattle were in the uplands, but not the very upper parts of the hills, so that the cattle could graze on the best available grass. Cows are a bit picky in what they will and won't eat, so giving them the better fields makes a lot of sense. Shielings for sheep and goats, and also sometimes non-dairy cows, but generally sheep or goats, were often further up the hill on less prime grazing land. Sheep and goats are a lot less picky than cows. They will eat a lot more of the vegetation than cows will. And in fact, many farmers with livestock will actually rotate animals in a specific field in order of how much grass they'll eat or turn up in that field. It's basically like a free lawnmower service, but like at a slower pace. So they start with the cows, and then they move the cows out and bring in sheep or goats, and then often chickens or pigs because they will tear up the earth. So sheep and goats can go up the hill to the less than wonderful but still good grazing land because they'll get much more out of it than the cows will. And Eddie was telling me that we even see the cow-sheep divide in the place names of these parts of Scotland. So there'll be a hill that's called something like Goat Hill, and then lower down the hill will be something like Cattle Glen or something along those lines. And we see this, it's not just like a one-off thing, there's a pattern of these place names that are showing that sheep are further up the hill and cattle are still in the uplands, still up the hill, but not quite as far as the sheep. Look at this, isn't this nice? It's got like a wee hearth. So this is modelled after a site that Eddie actually excavated, where the hearth is on one of the gable walls of the house. They also found a little indentation that they think was probably used for fuel. So I've put a wee chest down here with a little trapdoor because it looks nice. And then you can just store, you know, logs and such. Not that you need logs for a campfire in Minecraft, but I liked the idea of it. There's a wee seating area, there's a wee bed, but this one, as you can see, is a bit different to the first one. In fact, it's rather different. Here, let me go so you can see both of them, right? For starters, this one has a thatch roof similar to the Buyer house, whereas the one that I'm at now, sorry, the first shieling has a thatch roof. This shieling, the one I'm at now, I tried to use, I was aiming for a turf roof. So these roofs could be made out of turf or out of thatch or out of reeds, that kind of a thing. I went with moss because then you get the texture, like the grassy texture all the way down, rather than grass blocks, especially because I don't have silk touch yet. So getting grass blocks, not the easiest of things. And the turf roofs would often have like sticks going from the top of the roof, the apex of the roof, all the way down so that it held some of the material in place. But they would also just grow grass because it's turf, so stuff would grow on the turf roof. That's that. And the walls are one of these examples where they're made out of dry stone rather than out of turf, like the first shieling that I built. That's that. I quite like it. I've also made a wee well here just so that I don't need to keep going back and forth for water. And there's a wee composter here. And part of the reason there's a composter here is also because at this site that they excavated, well, a number of these shieldings that they've excavated, they've found midden piles, so basically trash heaps along the outside wall of the shieling. So I've just put the composter here to kind of act as a representation of those middens. And there are some nice touches, like this has the same general hearthstone as the first shieling and as the Buyer stone. So there's connections between them, but they are very, very different structures. And here's the cool part about shieldings, aside from all the other cool parts, because let's be honest, a lot of this is super cool. Eddie was telling me that there was a big practice of lighting the hearth at shieldings using embers from the hearths in people's homes in town. It was also a really big deal to keep the fires lit too, and there are loads of local prayers and chants about it. In fact, Eddie's even found something called a smooring stone, which is a stone that's used to smother the fire overnight, but it keeps the embers alive so that the fire never goes out, but it's also not, you know, a raging fire while you're asleep. So because there's so much practice around lighting these fires from the hearts of the fires in town and keeping the fires continually lit, it only makes sense that we do the same. And since there's all this stuff about keeping fires lit and passing the flame from one hearth to the next, it gives these hearths a lot more meaning. And what better way to show that increased significance around these hearths than to put my enchantment setup here at the top of the hill with all of my sheep? Granted, I might regret this because it is all the way at the top of the hill, so every time I need to enchant something, I might get a little bit annoyed that I've put it all the way up here, but the symbolic meaning was too much to refuse. Okay, so these shieldings are very nearly finished. The only thing left is to build a fence around this mountain, or a wall around this mountain, which, honestly, given the size of the mountain, that might actually take a while. So get ready for a time lapse. Now, Eddie was saying that you don't often get enclosures around shieldings, but because this is Minecraft and Minecraft mobs like to walk away, I'm gonna build an enclosure. When shieldings do have enclosures, they tend to be D-shaped, especially around a burn, which is a word for a small river here in Scotland. So I think I'll put a D-shaped enclosure up here with my sheep, and then I'll build a larger wall for all of my cattle down at their shieling. That way the animals can roam around the hill, and I don't have to worry about them wandering off. And the very last thing to do, everything is built. The last thing to do now is to get all of these animals up the hill, which might be the most annoying part of this build. We'll see. Okay, we've got all 3 of the sheep up here in this upper enclosure. They're all here. We're gonna breed them. Here, you wanna come along? Come here. Give you and you. Get some baby sheep. Yeah, there we go. Alright. We've got animals. We've got 2 shieldings. So let's do a wide shot. Look at this. We've got loads of Highland cows. This one, it's not, you can't get over the wall. This one just came up from the base. It did the passive mob thing of walking up hills and it ran into the wall. We've got cows, we've got sheep, we've got all sorts of things. And 2 shieldings. And the last thing to do is to clean up that chest monster over there. And then I want to thank some people for giving me hay bales. I still have a bunch, actually. I thought I was going to need more, but I ended up, for the second shieling, because I ended up using moss to make a turf roof, I didn't use as many hay bales, which means that I have hay bales for the next building that I have to build, which is good, because we're gonna have a number of things that we need to build. All right, so we're gonna clean up this chest monster, and then we're gonna bring some gifts to some people. One of my cows went to the nether. I mean, you know, it's a choice. Right, so I wanted to give some gifts. So Harold gave me like 10 to 15 hay bales, somewhere in there. And then Moon gave me like 35. And then Clara gave me 2 stacks. So we're gonna do... I have so many of these saplings and so many of these mushrooms. I do not need more. That's weird. Oh, is that in mine as well? Just 2 of them. Okay. And a cookie. Wonderful. Oh, mending! Oh my gosh, I need mending. Whoever gave me mending, thank you. Okay, so that means that everybody gets some dark oak saplings and some dark oak wood logs. And then Harold gets a bit of a thank you, and Clara gets a major thank you, and Moon. So that way everybody gets a bit of a present. And just in case you think that I don't have enough dark oak wood, don't you worry. I've saved so much, and there's so much in the buyer house as well, and the same with the saplings. It's everywhere. So don't worry. I'm not missing out in the slightest. Right. Well, the sheelings are done. The sheep have been moved in. The cows have been moved in. And I think we're going to end the episode there. That's all from me for today, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.